Hi everyone, it's Dr. Domingo and I hope you're all doing well. Thought I'd give you a quick wrap-up video here in Module 2 of our LDRD 632 class. So thus far I've seen some great discussions on the discussion board, so keep up the good work. One of the things that I did is I posted a quick announcement this morning on just encouraging you to find those connections in leadership. That is, as you look at our coaching literature, perhaps there's some things within leadership theory or some of the theories of leadership that you've studied so far that have some connection. For example, how does the fuel framework fit in within transformation leadership? Perhaps how does it fit in within situation leadership? So think about those connections and what they mean, and maybe even exploring some of that in your discussion posts. All that to say, keep up the great work because you're doing a great job in terms of writing, discussing, and just integrating these concepts we learn in this coaching class to your own personal setting. I often like to look at the leadership literature and find there's a lot of great stuff in journals, in peer reviewed literature, and even in the trade journals, and even the popular press for that matter. Sometimes I like to look beyond and look at some of the older stuff. And by older, I mean some of the even more older authors, like the Roman Stoics. Now, these are ancient authors back in the first century and such, and some of the Roman authors that I like reading from time to time are Marcus Aurelius and even Seneca, because as you read some of their writings, there's a lot of great leadership lessons that they wrote of way back then. And so, one of the common themes that I see when I read that literature is there's a lot of focus on the inward person. That is, there's a lot of introspection in their work. So while there's a lot of great wisdom and quips and quotes in terms of just handling the affairs of the day, there was a strong theme toward self reflection, introspection, or perhaps some in the psychologist literature call it insight. Whatever these things are, it's something that we did over the past couple weeks, especially this past week in Module 2, when we took a self assessment on how we view ourselves in terms of this coaching framework. Now, we also dug into the specifics of the fuel coaching framework, which we introduced last module. But then remember, the fuel framework is to frame the conversation, to understand the current state of affairs, to explore a desired state with a coachee, and then finally to lay out a success plan. And while this is an easy acronym to remember, the FUEL, really it serves as, again, a framework, as the text says, not a cage. So the idea behind a framework is that it's supposed to give you some guidance in terms of your conversations with coachees. As you consult or coach or train or whatever you call it with people, the fuel framework gives a good template for how the conversation flows. And the idea is that it should not be scripted. It should actually, you can, if you master each of these letters, go back and forth, but then cover all of these things as you converse. So the nice thing about it is, as we've delved into the specifics of each letter this past week, next week we're actually going to try it. So we're going to start our coaching conversations next week, and your goal is to apply this fuel framework. Obviously, try it with somebody else that you see might need a coaching sort of situation, whether that's at work or a personal situation. And some students in the past have said, I can't find anybody. Well, go ahead and seek your colleague out, because I think it's the whole thing behind this fuel framework is just having a conversation and learning to dialogue, but mainly learning how to listen. If you notice in a lot of the coaching literature, there's a lot in terms of listening and not just giving advice. As leadership scholars, one of the things we like doing is to give advice and to talk about what we know about leadership and offer solutions, and that's great. But remember, coaching at its heart is relational, and so it's a lot more listening than it is doing and giving advice to somebody. One thing I like to say as an example of this, and in a small way it's somewhat related, is when I work with dissertation students. And so as I work with the dissertation students, especially at the beginning, I always ask them, Tell me what you would like out of this quarter as you begin your dissertation. What are some of the goals that you'd like to achieve, and how would you feel about those goals? Well, and so we hear about their goals and such, and so I'd like to finish, this part of the dissertation by this date. And like, okay, are there any obstacles you think that would come up, or some issues that you see could come up throughout the quarter that might impact this timeline that you've suggested? Well, yeah, there's this and this, and there's this and this. It's like, okay, well, how do you think we should proceed then? What are your ideas in terms of how often should you meet? What would help you? That kind of thing. Uh, I do that naturally all the time with dissertation students, and it's somewhat follows the fuel framework if you think about it. So, in any case, the whole point is that next week we're going to delve into applying the fuel framework, see how it goes, begin our coaching conversations, and then discuss them. So, one of the nice things about our discussion next week is going to be talk about what happened during this coaching conversation. Again, the goal isn't to be perfect at it. The goal is just to try it and see how it works out and see what things you feel natural about, things that you feel you want to work on, and then let's talk about that online. All right, that's a preview next week. In terms of this week, continue to wrap up what we need to and discuss online. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Hope things are going well as we've translated to this new learning management system called Brightspace. Um, Again, if you have any questions on Brightspace, don't hesitate to shoot me a comment, email. Perhaps we can diagnose it together. I'm happy to talk through those things. But other than that, keep up the great work. You're doing well. Great discussions online, and I will see you all online.